Why? Alright, hi. So, this is going to be a bit of a different video, because I've been developing stuff for a D&D campaign for a little bit, and I've made maps, and I'm going to show you some of them after a bit. But for right now, I'm just saying I need to develop another map, and I decided I wanted to record it. Which, to me, it's fine, but I mean, I get if it's weird. I just wanted to show my process, because I have a bit of a very odd random process in which I make my maps, because I like to do things unorthodox, because I'm building it so that all the maps will line up, if that makes sense. They'll line up together and they'll make one big map at some point. But that's just the intro. This is going to be different. Let me know if you like it, because I'd love to do more of this. Like, I'm going to have the camera kind of sitting top down. And I'm also planning another video like this, which I'll probably do tonight, maybe. But that's really it. So here we go. Alright. So, get ready to make this video. But before that, I should probably get my materials, because, you know, you need materials to do, well, basically anything. For posterity. Okay, but no, seriously, I love this album of Men at Work called Business as Usual. If you don't know what it is, you should check it out. Alright, so, before we get into this stuff, we'll move that out of the way, and I will show you the maps I have so far. So I have 3 made for this campaign. This is the first one I made. I'm going to take them out of this. I have them all paperclip because I have copies for the players as well. I have this. I know it's going to be a bit hard to read, and I'm sorry. This is the best area I could work this in. All right, so it's a little bit off, and I'm very sorry about that. It's kind of a hassle. My tripod's a bit on the weird side, but we'll have to deal with it, you know, as we can. So, so this is the first map, like I said. This is the first one that I made. And then number 2 was this guy. This guy's a bit more barren. There's not as much there. And then finally, this is the last one I made. Now these are supposed to be plains, and I usually did the plains if they're like small plains. They kind of were like this. These little, oh, you can't see that. Let's bring that up. Kind of like that. Well, that right there, if you can see that. Those little slashes, but since these are a big thing of planes, I'm sorry, I am not doing those tiny slashes for this huge area. It's over 3/4 of the page. That would have taken hours and hours and hours. And I'm still, this is the first one I actually created. And these 2 are a bit more barren. But I'll show you what I mean when I said I wanted them to connect. So these 2 connect at the seams right in this area. And as you can see, it's not super perfect, but it kind of connects up. And then if we put these 2, this is going to be hard to see. It's right here at the back, but these 2 connect up. Let me move you so you can see it. These 2 connect up like that. It's not super easy to see, but they kind of come across here. They do, whoa. Hey now. But like I said, these connect at this seam right over here. That's hard to see. But basically just like this, and it kind of comes over all the way over here. But that's how they connect up. So the next one that's coming in actually connects into this one. And it's going to be connecting way down here. Oh man. Need to see the table just a bit more. It's going to be connecting down right over here. So how I do that, I'm going to bring this guy up, and then I grab my sketchbook, which is over here, and a couple pencil. What I'm going to be using is first this. I've heard it called an architect's pencil, but as well, I'm not entirely sure that's what it's called. But, you know, I'm going to be using a Micron pen, 0. The 0. It's the 5mm one. A Micron brush pen, a 7mm black V ballpoint pen. It's a V ballpoint. And then these they're technically fine point pens, but I use them as accenting pens. They're artist pens, and they're just red and black. Black, red. Oh, Jesus. And then if there's anything I need to do any kind of... I have a couple colored pencils over here. From here over are just some standard, regular, run-of-the-mill box color pencils. But these three are Prismacolor, and they are... I usually use them, and when I was making a ring set, I was drawing out rings. And I'll show those in a separate video at some point. But this right here is a charcoal pen. The charcoal pencil. I use it for accenting when I can't really use the pens, when the pens just won't work for anything. But that's it, really. Not too many tools. So I'm going to move those over onto my little stand that is just a chair. And then we'll grab a piece of paper. I like to take it out of this sketchbook just because it makes the drawing that much easier. And as you can see now, this is a nice clean edge. I guess you can't, because it's not focusing at all. It's a nice clean edge versus the ones I showed you earlier, which don't have any kind of clean edge whatsoever. Like this one, for instance, you can see there's a little tear right there. I got better with it as time went on. But I take my paper and I use this. Oh, what the fuck is this? Take this paper and I line them up so that all their edges are on the same length. And I just make a little just follow the line a little bit just so I could line it up. And then that's all I need to do to start making this. You didn't get to see that, but there's really not much going on. So I'm going to kind of speed through this part where I usually use something like, I might even use something like a matchbox, just some sort of straight edge so I'd use a matchbox like this, just kind of give me a straight edge to work on, or just kind of get a shape. And some of them I freehand. So as for right now, I'm just going to freehand this up real quick, and then we'll get back to it when I'm ready to trace. having a bit of a creative issue where I'm kind of getting ahead of myself, which is not okay. In any kind of map creation, you'll probably have points where you'll have an idea that you think is going to work and then it just doesn't pan out. And so you have a different idea halfway, and that's why I like to go in with a pencil really lightly and just really lightly bring this up. Don't really do too much work with that right away, because like if you go too hard onto the paper, you're gonna have an issue of just having an idea that does not rush right and doesn't run right and doesn't work with the idea you previously had for whatever region you're doing. This is with any kind of map creation, fantasy or otherwise. And that's mapped out. It's really hard to see right now. I know that. It's almost impossible to see actually, but trust me, there's a bit here. And so after that, I don't do any tracing with pen yet. I'm not gonna do that. I don't want to do that yet. It's not a good idea to trace too early, because if you do trace too early, you're going to have some sort of issue pop up where you'll have to kind of cross it out or something like that. For instance, I didn't think about this. There's a big gap between these two land masses, and I have to create a bridge. And I have to kind of go over it with on this map. But I'll make a bridge, and then I will explain how I made the bridge work afterwards. So you can kind of see it down here already. A thing with a bridge like this, a bridge that is supposed to be over a big body of water, especially in fantasy times, it's like, well, how do they make it? Don't really worry too much about it, because that's just going to make it that much harder on you to try and explain how it's made. It's just been made, and most of the time your players will be like, yeah, alright. If they ask the intricacies on how it was made, just don't even entertain the possibility, because at some point they're gonna bring it back to bite you in the ass, because that's what players do. Now this is gonna be one of the points where I do use that coloring stuff. I'm gonna use a quick technique. I'm also gonna use this charcoal pen. I actually am gonna use this charcoal pencil because I need to shade. Now, normally if you use charcoal, what you're going to do is you're going to shade after the fact. But with something like this, you're going to need to shade a little bit before. So I'm actually going to see if I can zoom in a little bit on this part right here. All right. It doesn't look great, and I'm very sorry. That's the best I can get, but I will just explain what the idea is. So you'll see there's a gap. I'll use this guy. You'll see there's a gap right here. Ooh, I don't want the lead out. You'll see there's a gap right here. And then if you can see it, I don't know, there's a smaller gap on this side. Now, no, they aren't like centered right. They didn't use a straight edge. I have very shaky hands. And then you'll see this little outcropping that I made. That little outcropping is supposed to be basically just like a ramp up into the bridge. I'll make another one on this map when it comes out. But these little bits right here, like this one, that little bit is going to be shaded. Most of the time, when you shade with charcoal, you want to shade after you put on the color you're going to use. But for this, I'm putting it on before because I'm not going to color under the charcoal. I'm going to use the charcoal as its shading agent and then color where the charcoal isn't. It's just to give it a bit of perspective, but it is such a small part of the map that I'm not going to put as much coloring work into it as I would if I was just actually just using charcoal. I don't know if you can see it. I don't think you can. Let me bring it up even further. It looks like it's more of the pen, but it actually isn't. It's just a little bit of shading. Just a tiny bit of shading. Just enough to get it to work. And then I'm going to be using a dark brown and then layering a light brown on that. Oh, that's for the... Nope. Because the bridge outside is stone. So I'm going to be using a gray, and then very lightly shading a black in. But I first need to get my pencil sharpener. Real quick, gonna sharpen the black. Again, usually when coloring, you would start with your darkest first. You'd start with your darkest first, and then add in the other pieces later to kind of accent it. In this case, we're going to be coloring as heavily with the gray, and then less with the black, and then accenting with white at the end. Just to kind of give it an accented look, but overall it's just going to look like stone. That's what we're going for. Alright, so there was a bit of an issue. The charcoal didn't come out the way I wanted it to under the gray. So we're going to reshade with more charcoal. Now, usually you'd erase the pieces that were in pencil, but I'm actually going to keep it just as accent markers. It just makes it a little bit easier. That's with the black, and then accent with the white. And so that's the gray kind of done. I kind of just rushed through it. Again, I did an accenting on the other side, but no shading. Again, it looks weird on camera, and it's hard to see because this camera is very grainy. I wish it wasn't. I'm looking for a new camera, but right now I have bills to pay. So, and then on the bridge, what we're going to do, excuse me, we're just going to use a light brown and then accent it with a dark brown and stop falling. And then the weirdest accent is actually going to be an orange. That's going to bring out a little bit of color. So let's start. So that's that light brown. And then do an accent of darker brown. Kind of ages the wood a little bit, but still lets it kind of pop. And then we do the quick and then finally, to make it look like it's actually a shaded bridge, we're going to... So with shading, the thing I like to do is take whatever size the area you're trying to shade is, which is this one right here, you take half the distance and just kind of mark a line with your shading tool. And then from there, just give it a good old shading. But don't cover it too bad. It's not going to look great. It's a very tiny bridge, but it just makes it give it that little bit. It looks awkward, I will not lie. But it works. It works as a bridge, and so we'll keep it as a bridge. Now, I wish I would have thought of this before I had actually made copies of the thing itself. Now we're just going to add in the wood grain. And there's a little bit of wood grain. It looks weird, it looks odd, it doesn't look like it's anything special, but it works. That's the big thing with map making stuff, map making like this. Just make sure it works. It doesn't have to be perfect, it doesn't have to look fantastic, it just has to work. So then, I'll zoom it back out, hold on. Okay, so now we have our bridge. I'll have to add that into every other piece. It's whatever, it's fine. It's perfectly fine. So now we have the way we can get our places together. So now what we're going to do is we are going to actually, well, first we want to line this up, right? So it looks okay. And then we're going to line up the bridge. What we aren't going to do is we're not going to line up the actual bridge parts like the railing. We're going to line up the bridge part of the bridge. And we will get rid of that later. But right now, like I said, we are just getting basically the skeleton of this map. So we don't need a lot of detail at the start. That last little bit you saw where I kind of just pulled it over. As I kind of just did a real light. I just made sure that the landmass still connects over there. So again, like, it's really hard to see any of this, but we have the skeleton laid out. Now what we want to do is with our ballpoint, we are going to trace around what we have. Now, I know I said not to do that. The reason I said not to do that right away is because you want to kind of look at what the map is supposed to be like. But this is still going to technically be part of the skeleton. It just gives us a framework to have that we can kind of use and work from. So I'm going to speed this up. It's going to take a bit. Alright, so now that's also easier to see for the video, but that is the skeleton of the landmass, and this little thing up here is the bridge. So, now we have this pencil. Now, I could go over and erase all this pencil right now, or I could wait and build up some cities and something else here. So first what I'm going to do is I'm going to find my a notepad. And bring up a note that I need. I need to write out one of the cities. What I would suggest, if you are doing this, is grab a nice pen, like this, write on the word cities. I'm actually going to use the ballpoint for this, because that Micron pen is also going a little bit bad. And then, write out the cities. Write out the cities you're going to get. So the first one I have is Atoken. That's the one I need. From there, you can kind of just add in cities as you see fit. If you want to add in any other parts, it's fine. Just kind of brainstorm some cities. But for right now, I don't have any other in mind. So I'm going to draw out where the city Atoken should be, which is Atoken. I think that's how I spelled it. Hold on. Yes, that is how I spelled it. All right. So now we're going to draw out some cities. What I like to do with cities is I like to just put the names of their name where I want them and highlight that name in pen immediately, because that solidifies where they are. Because if I don't do that, I'm going to change where they are all the time, and it's a hassle. It is just a huge, huge hassle. And then I kind of just I like to grab that Micron pen's going bad. How bad is it going? And there we go. Now the city is locked in. And as you'll see on different areas, the bigger, at least how I did it, the bigger the font, like the bigger I make the font, the bigger the city. So for instance, on this one, there's a tiny little thing right here. I don't know if it'll zoom in right. Right there. Norfolk. But then if I were to grab this one, it's kind of hard to see with this. It's called Vexnia. Norfolk is small and Vexnia is big. And then Atoken, which you can actually see like right here, you can't really read it, but you can see it, is even bigger than Vexnia, which is technically the capital city. The only thing is, Vexnia is very condensed, while Atoken is very open. But then I have other cities I want to put in here, and I don't know what to call them yet. So with that, we also want to start adding in a little bit of our foliage, just a bit of it. So I always bring the second map. I'm going to have it sitting over here. I just have it sitting over here for reference of what I have on here already, what I could add. First, I think I could add a good mountain range. Nice big mountain range. I kind of want to add a big one. Alright, I have the mountain range built. Now I just gotta, well, do it. For something like this, I like to use this pen for the accent. Oh, Jesus. I like to use this for the accenting. Instead of the Micron pen, I want to use something that's a little bit less fine pointed, because it just makes it a little bit easier. And that is a mountain range. It looks a little weird just because it's kind of big, but soon it'll look nice because we're going to add a bit of shading on the side. So we're going to use this black colored pencil just to kind of that's not going to come out well on the screen. Let's see if I can bring this up a little closer. You can see those little black spots right through there. That's the colored pencil I put on there. It's just a little bit of shading. It's a tiny little detail that just makes this a little bit better. And I put it on before I erased the pencil, and I'm an idiot. So I gotta redo that stuff. I actually might put it on a little bit further through. Yeah, I actually like that a little bit better. Again, it's just a little bit of shading. A little bit of shadow goes a long way to just kind of showcase its range. It doesn't look great. I'm going to actually grab wherever I put it on my phone. I'm going to grab my phone to take a picture and kind of showcase how it looks. So future me, put up that picture so you can see it. It's shaded and it looks kind of like a mountain range. Again, I'm not going for anything super, like, I'm not trying to make this super realistic or try and make it look like the most amazing map you've ever seen, but I am just trying to make it look kind of better. So we added that, and then something I like to do is add in cliff sides. In every map, I think, no, well, which will now be 3 of the 4, but 2 of the 3 maps I added a cliffside in, where there's just like an area where there's a cliff outcropping. And I will make a little one in here. Because if I can't think of cities right away, I kind of make other parts. I like to make other parts of the world because it just makes it a little bit easier to think of cities while I'm just working on this stuff. Something I would suggest is you kind of do this squiggly pattern like that, and then add where you want them to end, and I'll show you what I mean by that. But add it in very light pencil. Very, very light. The reason why I say to do that is you're not going to keep that pencil in there. It's not going to stay there. You're actually going to shade off of that, like shading this way, because that's just where it'll end and it'll shade and it'll look right. Then you're going to add a little bit of accents, a couple little accent marks just to kind of show that this is a cliffside. And this is actually a technique I learned from, I think his name is Nate from WASD 20. And I really, really do like the look of it. I think it looks really, really good. It makes it look more like a cliff face and actually kind of feel like a cliff side. And you don't have to go to every, I usually go straight lines down on the points, and then where it recesses in, a dotted line. You do not have to do every point and every recess. I mean, your players will understand what you mean. But where you see like really protruded points or really pushed back recesses, that's where you should really put these accent marks. Because that kind of showcases what it actually is. Seeing it as a cliff face is kind of nice. And then don't make the cliffside, don't make those accent lines go down too far, or else it'll just start looking like a flat piece. And you want to try and add as much dimension as you possibly can. So I'll bring it up again, because I really like the look of that. I really like how it looks. It kind of looks like a cliffside. It really does. And then from there, I like to kind of draw out where it's going to shade, because I like to shade it with a pen. I like to draw out how it shades. And you kind of got to follow that line. So something I like to do is where it comes out, where it juts out forward, where the shadows will be higher, kind of put a point where it'll be the like farthest out, and stay below that for the rest of it. And then just kind of follow your line. Be very light with the pencil. Try and make it feel like a real shadow. And one mistake I just made is don't make your shadow end. Let it continue onward so that it kind of feels like it's a real shadow. And then I'll show you again. I'll bring it up here. Now I don't know if you're going to be able to see that, but that little tiny line is where that like punched out that much, and that's your shade line. It doesn't look great right now, I know. But what we're going to do now is we're going to trace all of this and make it look really, really solid and really good. Now for these, I really like to shade in pen, because as with the mountains, they don't need shaded in pen. I do some of them, depending on how big or small it is. Since those mountain ranges were really big, it kind of was easy to shade it in colored pencil. But for something that's a little bit bigger, something that's a little bit smaller, for mountain ranges anyways, I'd want to show it in pen just so it kind of looks still like it's shaded, because if you do tiny little pieces with a colored pencil, it's just going to look like a dirt speck on the page, or like it's not supposed to be there. And so as you can see, there's that, and then we're going to add in those accents like I talked about with the pen. And do not trace your shade lines at all. It may seem tempting to, you may want to, but I assure you it will not look great. And when you trace it, you have to follow it. And it's nice to not follow the shade line exactly, because then you can kind of you can be kind of more liquid with the shade line and make it look more natural. Look, I really enjoy that. That's very beautiful. Looks like a cliff face. And not super well yet. It's kind of a little bit weird and odd. But now we're going to do our shading. I just wanted to come in here real quick and stop the video just to say I shaded with the ballpoint pen, and it actually wasn't a great idea overall. You'll see why a little bit later in the video. But I actually would suggest maybe shading with a brush pen or something that is less harsh on the paper than a ballpoint pen, because you have to shade a lot. That's really it. I just wanted to make sure that I put that in here real quick, because I made a big mistake and I paid for it. And as you'll notice, I'm not tracing any lines. It might look like I am, but trust me, I'm not going by any sort of lines. I'm just kind of outcropping this, but I'm kind of hacking and slashing with it rather than just coloring it in. Because again, you want to make this feel natural. And shadows aren't always this perfect, especially of something like a cliff. They're not perfect and they're not even. And so it kind of has those little pieces there. And then after that, you just kind of color in up to that edge line that you made. You can go a little bit outside of that edge line, but don't go too far, because there'd be a point where it doesn't look like the sun could even hit under there. And you have to think about it from a sun's perspective, so to speak. And if you don't know, look up some reference pictures of some cliff face shadows, and you'll be able to get kind of a better idea of where the sun actually starts to hit. And there will be a little splotches where you don't get it in there. That's okay since we're doing so much with it. If you can't get it in there, I'd recommend just keep going. Just get through the entire bulk of it first. And then you'll be able to kind of go in with a more fine pen and really touch up those pieces that need it. Making stuff like this is a little bit on the difficult side. I will admit it is a bit time consuming. But when the end result looks very nice and when you can be proud of the end result, I think it's well worth it. It's well worth the time invested. So now I think we're going to have to go to the finer point artist pen and kind of really dig into those nice pieces to really make that look right. And make it look a little bit uniform, but not too uniform, because shadows aren't uniform, and they're not supposed to be. It's nature. It never makes sense. There. And now we have that nice shade. And there we go. Now that looks like a cliff face. It kind of looks like it comes through and comes over. And again, I really love making cliff faces like this. I didn't really meet him, but I do want to thank, I really think his name is Nate, WASD20, for really showing this method and really getting it down pat. Ooh, now you'll see an issue that I ran into. There's a little piece of paper that got pulled up because I was a little too hard with the pen. If that happens, don't worry. As long as it doesn't show too much, but this one did actually pull off a bit, as I'll show you. It pulled off and made it look really, give it that real, you can see the paper under that, but all you gotta do is take the artist pen again and just very lightly kind of dot the pen in there. Just little spots like that. Don't pull the pen. Just kind of dot it along the paper. It'll get the job done. The pen that when you use the eraser to get that off there too, the pen might smear a little bit. That's okay. Again, it looks kind of natural. It looks kind of cool. It's a necessary evil that you have to deal with. And now we're kind of seeing this little, what was just this little shape is now kind of coming together into more of a map, more of a piece than just a shape now. So now that we're here, I have had a couple ideas of cities that I've wanted to do, and whenever I have a few ideas, I also want to bring over the notepad again and kind of next to the city name, right, if it's large or small. So Adoken is large, and then I have, did I already make cartograph? Did I make that a place? I can't remember if I did. Cartograph. I remember hearing that name years ago in something. I don't remember what I heard it in. But, and that's a small city, small village, whatever. It's something. And then we'll do 2 more cities, make it 4, kind of spread them out. And you don't need to dot the landscape with cities, because the villages and stuff, especially in an old fantasy world, you wouldn't have every single little village on the map as well. You can kind of just make those up as you go. Just what I like to do is I like to have a piece of notebook paper that just has village names on it. Just a random, like, I'll usually go with 50 to 100 village names, and just as I use them, cross them off and say which map they're on and what city they're near. And then I can always refer back to that, and it'll be fine. So the next city, I'm thinking I want to just and don't be afraid to ever use real city names. It's perfectly fine to. I see a lot of people who don't want to. I see a lot of people who are like, I want to make it fantasy, but even in fantasy, you do get similar sounding names to what you hear in everyday life. I mean, sure, there's cities like Neverwinter that you never hear a place like that. But what is it like the Sword Coast, and then or that sounds kind of fantasy, but Gulf of Mexico is kind of in that same thing. Like it's naming something, and then you just put an item there. So Sword Coast, or the you can put the Gulf of the Eagle. Again, these are gonna sound dumb. They're gonna sound kind of odd, but you then can make a whole history behind it, and it allows you to kind of work in history into your world that you don't have to explain. The players have to try and find it, or they already know it, and you can just jot down little notes. One thing I will say is if you're going to create history in your map, don't make a multi-page background that you're going to tell your players. You can always have a multi-page background and just in a text chat or in some sort of sharing service, share the background of your city or of your world and let the players read it at their own pace. Let them learn about it if you really want them to learn about it. If not, just give them the footnotes of it, and you don't have to go too hard in it. The worst idea is to overload your players with information and then expect them to retain everything. For instance, my campaign, we all don't really like to take notes. I mean, we keep our campaigns pretty simple. I don't, as a DM, I don't require you to take notes. If I need you to note something down, I'm going to give you a note card with it on there. Because it's just easier for me as well. Everybody has the same explanation of something. So I don't have to worry about having, four different people write it down in their notes four different ways, and then someone forgets to write down a piece, but someone else has it. Every player would have taken note of it if they were actually taking notes in the game. One player would have taken note of it, or every player took a mental note of it, and it was remembered in the same way. It can create confusion when the players have to take a bunch of notes. However, I do like taking campaign notes depending on the campaign. It just depends for me as a player. A lot of times I won't take notes, but I'll jot little pieces down, little pieces of information. If it's an item I got, I'll write down the item, what it does in bullet points, and that's about it. This all stemmed from me explaining you can have a city name that you hear in real life. Like, for instance, I'm going to make this one. This is Liverpool. I like the name Liverpool. It actually kind of sounds a bit fantasy. It makes me feel like it's a little bit fantasy, and I'm going to make it a medium size. Now, the sizings I put in here are kind of arbitrary. They are a bit on the arbitrary side. I mean, medium and large, they're going to look similar. It's just when you get into the cities, that's when I use the things I've given, the small, the medium, the larges, and then you get into a city that I have in a different map that I haven't made yet called the extra large cities. Those are big ones. Those are monster cities. Those ones can be a country on their own. And something I did in the beginning maps that I'm not doing anymore is giving country names. You don't really need them. You don't need the country names. I'm going to give them country names now because continuity, but you don't need those. And a lot of times I'll give a place a country name in a campaign, and then I will never use the name of the country. I'll just use the cities that are in there, and if a player asks what country we're in, then I use it. But since I already made them have country names, I'm going to continue that trend throughout all the other maps. You don't have to. There's a lot of things that I'm doing in here that you do not have to do. Because, again, D&D map making or any kind of not dungeons, any kind of tabletop role-playing game map making, there's so many ways to do it. Find your own method. I got inspiration from WASD 20, but I quickly found myself kind of going in my own direction from there. my long explanation. I'm very sorry. But I'm also trying to think of one more city name. I only need one more. I only need one more city name, and I'm trying to think of a good one. Sometimes I'll look around the room, look at boxes of stuff, look at anime or manga or even music. Just try and find something, and if all else fails, just put a bunch of letters together. That's how I got Atoken. That's how I got Kelkek. And if all else fails, video games. Video games have a bunch of names. And this is what that one's going to be. Verdanturf. And that's another small place. So now I have the cities I want. And I also like to check off the cities I've already made. So I checked off Atoken. And since I've checked it off, that means I need to make a boundary for it. For bigger places, I like to make a boundary that they sit in. Now, the only city I've made a boundary for that I actually sprawled out was Vexnia. Besides that, I don't really actually trace the boundary, because to me that just doesn't feel right. Because not every city has a wall, and most of the cities in this campaign, in this world, will not have walls. They just won't. But sometimes they could. And this is going to be a very, very crude shape. Very freehand, just kind of getting a feel for where it's going to end. And it's not going to go off the map. If that's one piece of advice I can give you, don't make your cities go off of your map if you're going to make pieces like I am. Because then it just becomes so hard to keep them in line and intact, and it just becomes a bit of an issue. And so Atoken is big. Now, I should mention as well, there is an actual distancing I have. For every half inch is 100 miles. And so some of the cities in here are gigantic. Atoken is big. Vexnia is huge. Actually, Vexnia is bigger than Atoken. I don't know why I thought it wasn't. Vexnia is gigantic. It's one of the biggest places. But again, the biggest city is yet to come. And I don't have a name for it. I know where it's going to go. I know it's going by. But it's going to be gigantic. It's going to be just huge. It is just going to be, I'm not kidding, probably about this big. To give you a reference, Atoken is about this big. So that city's about this big. Roughly about here. City's going to be massive because it's just what I wanted for it. Now, I know we're seeing this little bridge thing over here, but I'm not going to get to that yet. I'm not going to do any kind of thing with that until I'm done with the entire map first. I want to get everything else laid out on the map, get all my cities in place, get all my ducks in a row, so to speak, and then I'll get to coloring and adding in a bit more detail. Now, I like to add in details on places where I need to. Like, for instance, in this map, there's not a lot of color in it, except for the red roof of this, which is the Dawnhammer Guild where everyone starts. This tree in the Forest of Life, which I actually kind of hid the Forest of Life in this one. But that tree, because it is very, very reminiscent. And the Forest of Life does go a lot of places. It's in 3 parts of the map, and that is where it ends, but it is a massive forest. It is huge. Because it's a Forest of Life. So then, I need to find a spot to put Cartograph, and I know exactly where I want to put it. Right around here. Ooh, that's a bit big. Like I said, I try to keep it consistent. The bigger the city, the bigger the font. The smaller the city, the smaller the font. Just kind of what I like to do with it. And as well, I like to think of these cities as being like hand drawn by people. I think it adds in just another awesome layer. So I like to try and make the letters be different sizes or something. These are hand drawn maps that people are, transcribing, so to speak. Just kind of, it's gonna try and make it look neat, obviously, but you don't have to make it look insanely good or anything. Now, Cartograph is much smaller, like I said, and this is actually one of the instances where the city name is actually bigger than the city itself. I also moved it up higher. If you, I don't think anybody really worried about it, but I did move it up a little higher just to kind of make it easier to get to. And Cartograph is this nice small little area right down here. It's not very big. It's pretty tiny, honestly. I'll show you what I mean. So if you can see that little pencil area, there is the city, and the name is bigger than it. And so that's another one in the bag. So let's cross that off. Give that a check mark. A check mark. A check mark. Buh. Oh, God. Next city is Liverpool. And I want to put this one on the other side of the mountain range. And I'm thinking, what if I put, like, maybe do I want a river through here? Not really. Um, Rivers are nice and all, but you don't have to add them, obviously. Jesus. Not every place is going to have a river. But ponds are always nicer, man-made ponds. Like the people of Liverpool, maybe they made a pond. It smelled like liver. So that's why it's called Liverpool. I don't fucking know. But we'll write out the name, and it's medium, so we'll make it kind of big. I am going to say, if you're anything like me and you have terrible penmanship, I would recommend getting better penmanship before you start writing out maps, because if your players can't even read your map, that's going to be an issue, because then you're going to have to read it for them, and trust me, from personal experience, having to read things that you've worked very hard on to your friends because they just can't read your handwriting, that doesn't feel good at all. Again, you don't have to write as neat as you possibly need to. Like that, you don't have to write the neatest ever, but it just helps to have it. It can, at least you can see it and you can read it. It's legible. Because I got chicken scratch. When I write stuff for me, I got chicken scratch. So we're just gonna kind of make Liverpool come out around here and bow up a little bit. Again, it doesn't matter. The shape doesn't matter. Actually, we're gonna redo that because it's gonna be big enough that the name can kind of exist within it. Oh, Jesus. Oh, and also, always, these erasers are so nice. They're so nice that I needed two. I would recommend these because, again, you can control how much you have. If you need it to be a little more precise, push this down a little bit, and then you have less of the eraser to use. But if you need more, just for leverage, obviously you can push it back up. Very nice, very nice. I love these kind of erasers. They're very, very good for, especially for writing out stuff, but they're just nice in general to just have. like I said, the shape around the city doesn't really matter as much as just that you have the city shape, kind of. Again, you don't need to worry about how big it is. It's just kind of, you're going to add in, basically, whenever you do like foliage, it's just there, so you don't go in, so it kind of looks like that. I kind of screwed it up in my first few maps, and then I kind of get okay on the next ones, but this is going to be the first one that has more than one city again. So whenever you do kind of foliage or anything around um, the cities itself, it's just so you can have a good area that you get to work in. And then when you have something like that, you can then put in like a little lake, like I talked about. I want to put in a little lake. It was a man-made lake, and for that we are going to actually outline it with the Micron pen. Just so you have that little lake there. As you can see, it's tiny. You can't really see it too well. It's right there. If it would focus, please. 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 Oh, God, come on. Come on. Will you please focus? There we go. Like, you see it right there. It's a little outline area, obviously. As well, a nice easy way to accent water is just put a couple lines in it, just with the Micron pen. Okay, it's not showing. I'm gonna take another picture because Jesus Christ. I'll put up the picture of that right now. It's gonna be a bit of a shadow in there, but that's what it looks like. That's a real easy way to accent water. It's another good way to, if you're wondering, it's another good way to accent glass if you're trying to build like what would look like like a tower or something that has windows. It'd be really nice to accent something like that as well. Also, I'm probably going to split this video up into 2 parts. So that's going to be the end of part 1. And I'll see you again in part 2, where I do more work. We kind of get into Verdant Turf, which is a small place, and then I get into foliage. So, I'll see you in the next one. Bye.